So last session we looked on how to write a unit test, right? So in order to test some logic in our code, we started using unit tests. So in this session, we'll be continuing on different test types. So we'll see the benefits and advantages as well as disadvantages when we are working with these different kind of testings. So if you guys can remember, we developed a small web application to illustrate two things. The first thing is the MVC pattern. So we talked about the model view controller pattern using an Angular application, very simple one. So we demonstrated simple routes and also we looked into things like how we can architect MVC application and what are the different things that we need to work on this. And by differentiating these layers, by introducing these layers, what will be the developer experience, how a software can be improved upon using these kind of techniques. So the first thing that we looked in here is like we looked upon the view, which is represented by an HTML. So if you're coming from, if you know some other frameworks like React, probably this will be something similar to the JSX syntax that we have seen. But in Angular, we have a separate file for that, the HTML files, which represent the view of our application. And we have our component, which is responding to the controller layer. Component actually represent the controller. So if you want to write any logics or something like that, we'll be writing those things within the controller layer or the component that we have in here. And the next thing is we talked about is the model or the logic layer behind that. So we introduced something called we call a service. So we had written a simple service, a dummy service, which represent a model. The model is being a type of interface which represent a game. So in this scenario, we have represent a list of games. So we can show those things in our UI. And let me zoom it a little bit so you guys can see clearly. So we have some things with regarding the changes that we have done, and we have some methods which will return the logics. But remember, this is very simple scenario that we are talking in here. We are talking fairly simple service, or say fairly simple logic. We're just returning a list of games within our application. But in real life application, there will be more complex task assigned to this. So it will be a little bit different. But nevertheless, the theories behind testing is somewhat similar. So we have introduced the what we call a unit test out of this list service. So rather than testing everything as a whole, we'll be testing out the game list service, the logics behind the game list service will be tested out. So this is one of the great advantages that we have seen, because we are not gonna test the UI and everything itself. We'll be testing the service only, so we can expect our data layer to work perfectly as expected. So we have written what we call a test suite. So a test suite is annotated by this describe block. So we have a describe block for testing out the game list service, and we have different life cycle events. So we have before each. So before each is executed every time one of these test cases are gonna be executed. So before each and every is gonna be executed, before each whatever the inside the before each will be executed. So we introduce the main four lifecycle methods. In this scenario, we'll be using only before each, but remember there are before all, before each, after each, and after all. So different lifecycle methods are available, and make use of the lifecycle methods as you go along. Okay, so we written some simple test cases. Remember, when we are writing these kind of simple test cases, we'll be testing out a certain scenario. Okay, and a test case is denoted by this IET notation. So we should test thoroughly the positive scenarios, negative scenarios, and few of the uncommon ones. So make sure when you guys do your testing, it should have all the possible